Yeah, so yeah, that gives me just setting the table here. We're talking about creating space earlier. And so, what kind of a space are you thinking for this specific podcast?
So one of um, accessibility for all individuals. That's getting new players and their views on the game, whether it's getting older players and their views on like the state of the game, not to mention like the higher end mechanics, having constructive but critical uh, topics. So not just using it as a space of venting, but a space of bringing to light and starting a conversation.
Yeah, so it sounds like you want this to be something that individuals would find value in.
Yeah, yeah, and not just like an entertainment value, but a critical thinking value.
Excellent. Well, Dungeons and Dragons Online definitely provides a lot of opportunity for entertainment, but also from a critical orientation as well.
Totally agree. And so with the first few of these, try to focus in on hardcore, and that's what's hot right now. That's what's new, and it's a completely separate experience than anything else that DDO has brought.
Boy, what an experience it's been so far. To me, just watching the red names on the world broadcast go time after time after time, it's just unbelievable. I had no grasp of how many times people died on any server, but this definitely communicates to the permanency of it and the frequency of those deaths.
Yeah, and the impact whenever you see someone like the first few days seeing a 10 go down and it being a big deal, and now seeing even still 16s to 20s, anything above 20s, like holy my, was that intentional? Are they throwing? Like, are they just done with their character, or did something actually happen? Because it's a lot of commitment in.
But it happens so quickly, like when death is looming and imminent, it's like sometimes it's like a dog tripped and there's nothing you can do. And it's like, oh no, oh no, oh no, that
Yeah,
type of thing.
it just gets worse and worse, and then over a second it's done, and it goes to it puts a lot of value on understanding, which before DDO's hardcore, I'd never been a big hardcore player. I just didn't enjoy the idea of losing all of the progress. But now, having such a huge background in playing DDO for thousands upon thousands of hours, understanding the mechanics, I'm getting such a blast out of it, of setting my character up to maximize my potential of living, of utilizing that knowledge to identify this is a really bad situation, to just go gung ho and I need to tone it back.
Right. For me, I think only two games really speak to me as far as hardcore. And the whole battle royale genre, I guess you can kind of consider a hardcore. You die, you're out. Then you start back from scratch. And then Realm of the Mad God, that's the only other experience I have at that level. I've definitely had some PvP experience, but nothing like this.
Yeah, and
The
so
stakes are very high.
with the focus on DDO, but what does Realm and DDO both do that makes it so DDO is different? That your experience in it is different. Like, you're still playing hardcore month and a half after it's been out, comparatively to only playing Realm when the siblings or your children are playing.
Sure, for me personally, it's the depth, Dungeons and Dragons, the history of Dungeons and Dragons, the depth of it. It I've been playing it since it came out, first edition with the pink boxes, so in the late '70s. So it I definitely have a lot of good memories with it, and those are associated. But for Dungeons and Dragons Online, in the last 13 and a half years it's been out, almost 14 now, um, there's so much involved in it, and it takes on so many different iterations. Um, I love the hardcore dynamic because it's just a new twist. You know, it's not about leveling and reincarnating, leveling and reincarnating, and raiding and gear and raiding and gear. All of those are aspects of it, but the permanency of that death is such a big deal.
Could not agree more. Nothing has been quite like it within the game since you had the pink bar when you lost experience upon death in the first handful of years of the game being out. And even
Right.
that wasn't like not near as impactful.
Mhm. So far, my highest character is a level 15. I'm happy with the progress, and I'm definitely taking it at a solo rate. Most of it has all been solo. My duo partner, Pointy, he died and I died with our prior characters at level 10, and he's still trying to build up a character. I think we both have characters at level 9 that are working together. So Molybdenum has just been doing his own thing, and there have been a couple precarious times. I have, you know, I'm not ashamed to say I have Alt F4'd out 2 or 3 times now, and got the heck out of Dodge when things went sideways. But for the most part, I play slow, I play cautious, and I'm milking every quest, you know, for what it has, just because of either familiarity or the risk, you know, as you would say, super rippy or not, whether they are.
Yeah, some quests are like the value in doing them is really high. And if you can set yourself up to specifically do that quest, if it's a really trappy, lot of traps in the quest, but you have a trapper available and its reward is great, like Zorian Cipher, so you get your Planar Gird, your Greater Heroism clicky, then that can be huge. I make it a point to farm for that every single time, and I've gotten 6 so far. But not doing it without a, or doing it without a trapper is asking for danger.
Yeah, there's that final path that has 3 sets of traps, and that's instant death right there for a lot of people.
Not to mention just the traps on the chests themselves. The
Oh yeah,
final,
especially the GERD trap.
yep,
Mhm.
that force.
And that's what got me at the level 10 was Dead Girls, the Dead Girls spell book in Dolaris. And there are 2 sets of double-bladed traps that I did not see with my spot vision. And hit the first set of blades, and figured I would just roll through it, and then I rolled right into the second set of blades. So
Yep. Oh, the
that's all it
1-2.
takes.
I think that what I've done to mostly mitigate that, and it's not even like some quests are so obscure, like Dead Girls, like no one ever runs them. They're just not an interest, or they're not anything on live other than a little bit of favor. And you can do that at level 30 at max, so you literally have no chance of dying. But with the level 4 gate, 4 levels above gate, and lockout, you have to really be aware. Even a quest that you don't run or you consider easy, it's suddenly a lot more, has a lot more potential to actually end your entire run. So I've been having the wiki up and wikiing almost every single quest and pulling up the map and seeing exactly where boxes are and where traps are, and
Mhm.
playing it very slow in that aspect.
Yeah, and it has me wonder what other quests are just their risk is greater than their reward, and they're worth skipping in this hardcore dynamic.
I know at the start, very start, Proof is in the Poison was one that was in a lot of people's skip list. Um,
And what was it about proof that was it just the amount of poison and the amount of traps?
the traps aren't actually that bad. The massive amount of mobs you have to fight through, hundreds of casters and fighters. Any of them, the more mobs there are, the bigger chances there are for champions, let alone Reapers at the very beginning. If you were crazy enough to try to do it in Reaper 1, the monsters have stunning, they have lightning bolt to chain hit you, and the damage just in general, if you do get pinned, if you do get hypnotized, if you get mobbed, all of a sudden it can get out of control really fast.
And it sounds like you might, you may not, you may have pulled back a little bit on not doing it. So you're actually doing it now, or do you still skip that one?
Yeah, my first character that I got to level 19 to get 5,000 favor, get my bloody footprints, did skip Proof is in the Poison. And now with more gear and more understanding of how hardcore feels and how it, my thought process of being able to take those quests more methodically and understanding. Because before, I don't run Proof is in the Poison much on live and didn't have that understanding of the quest. And now I can go, I know where the traps are, I know where the big influx of monsters are, and I know how to prepare for that.
Yeah. So that preparation piece is super important. And it reminds me of the concept where I heard years ago when I was just a kid watching professional bowling, where Nelson Burton Jr., the Hall of Famer, used to say, luck when opportunity meets preparation. And luck can go both directions. You know, if a person's not prepared and the opportunity presents itself, it can go sideways in a hurry. But with preparation, you know, the opportunity now turns into, you know, a fortuitous scenario instead of a one of demise.
Exactly. And so that's where you're able now I do Proof is in the Poison on my way up. That's a nice little chunk of favor early on. A little bit of Reaper experience, not a ton. You can even run it just on Elite to get the favor and then move on at that lower level. But a quest like Temple of Elemental Evil Part 2, on the other hand, that has an insta-death mechanic that has an RNG factor. You get cursed and you have to go to a mushroom to cleanse it. And if a mushroom doesn't spawn in the right position, if monsters tie you up, if anything, there's so many extraneous circumstances that can happen where it results in your death. I have seen I know of no one that has completed Temple of Elemental Evil Part 2.
It sounds like a terrible idea. And I I even attempted part one, and there's one area in there I was doing it in a non-wiki fashion, and there was one area in which I just started taking cumulative acid damage, I believe it was, and I had no idea what was going on, and that was an instant bail on on that quest.
Yep. And I've only done it a handful of times. I skipped it. It's another quest, Temple of Elemental Evil Part 1 and 2, ones that I skipped on the 5K favor tune. And have since gone back on my Reaper tunes, but I've only done them on Elite just for the favor. There's just not a risk, or the reward is not great enough for the risk of dying. A little bit of Reaper experience, because Reaper experience is mostly based off of the level of the quest. So at higher levels, it can be worth it. At the same time, and then at lower levels, you have a little bit more leeway room to bypass some of those quests. So the Slaver's Chain is another quest chain that's on people's like be careful list. Part 1 and Part 2, ton of traps, lots of monsters. Champions can really hit hard. It's newer than not, and so you have monsters that are scaled more appropriately, and then part 1 and 2 have that going on. Then part 3 is the same thing, still long, it's still lots of stuff going on. There's a death laser in it, and then the end fight. There's one boss that is an assassin, and he lives up to the name and can take you down ridiculously fast.
Oh my god.
And so,
yeah, I'm not familiar with the Slaver's quests, so it sounds like they're very dangerous.
yes, and so I do them on, if I do choose to do them, I'm 4 levels above. Been 3 levels above, mostly in Reaper experience, so you get maximum Reaper experience. If you're 4 levels above a quest, you get minus 10%. And on hardcore, no matter how many levels above, you have bravery bonus. So 3 levels above is maximum survivability for experience. I take the 10% hit and only do it on Elite, Part 3, and run around in circles with Falconry Speed Boost, just so I can make sure I'm not going to get pinned down and taken out, because I've seen it. The first time that I went into Slavers Part 3, the assassin just came up and clobbered someone who was standing still, focused on something else.
You bring up a good point about the Reaper experience points. So that was recently revamped and changed, and it sounds like now, say we're going into Red Willow Ruins, and it's a level 6 quest. Choose to do it on hard, it becomes a level 7 quest. Do it on elite, it becomes a level 8 quest. Now, is it my understanding that on Reaper, it's now a level 9 quest?
No, so Reaper
No.
now, I don't know how it was before. I just came back a handful of months ago, May, and then when I stopped playing after 4 years from release until 4 years after, Reaper wasn't a thing. It was just a concept on the horizon. So I don't know what the original iteration was, but now it takes your elite quest level, so Red Willow would be level 8, and it adds you deal less damage, monsters deal more damage, and have more damage resistance, on top of chances of Reapers spawning on monster spawn and monster death.
So as far as the experience goes, say you're level 9 and you're doing Red Willow on Reaper 1, what type of penalty, XP penalty, does that grant?
So on hardcore specifically, a little bit different than live. On hardcore, you keep your bravery bonus no matter what. If you're doing it on hard, you get your 50% bravery bonus. If you're doing it on elite, you get your 100% bravery bonus. Doesn't matter if you are levels under or over the quest. You'll always get bravery bonus. Not how it works on live, but we're focused on hardcore for this instance. And then if you're 4 levels above the base quest, so if you're level 10 doing Red Willow on Reaper 1, you'll get a flat 10% to everything. And so if you want to maximize your Reaper experience, you want to do it at level 9, where you're the highest level without getting a penalty. You're maximizing your survivability.
So 3 levels above still grants no penalty at that point.
Correct.
Okay. Intriguing. With regard to the Rippy quests, now why would you do something like the Reaver's Fate when it actually has a timer that you could literally die when the whole place blows up? Why would you choose to do something like that and even take the risk?
So it depends on how much randomness is in it. When you go into Reavers, you have, I think it's 15, 16 minutes, 20 minutes, I forget the exact time. From this moment that you start the quest, a timer starts to tick down, and you can see that timer at all times. Once you kill the Reaver and have the kill switch pulled, you have 3 minutes to do the puzzle. And if it's getting down to 30 seconds, you can recall out and be completely fine. You have it's all within your own control, comparatively to Temple of Elemental Evil, or quests that are scaled a lot more, like the Archon's Chain, which I recently died in on my Reaper experience, on my highest Reaper experience tune. Mm-hmm. The monsters in there are scaled very to more match today's power, and so they'll be doing more damage. And so if a champion Frostrender sees you and pole arrays you along with a tiefling sorcerer auto stunning you, you can be in a really, really bad situation really fast, and that's a random thing that can happen. Go back to the Reavers example, you always know when that time will expire and can remove yourself from that situation ahead, or in preparation as opposed to in response.
Makes complete sense. What other quests are off your list right now? Just not even worth it.
The last quest in the Rage Chain, Toxic Treatment, everything up until the end fight is a touch difficult. It's a newer chain. It came out about a year ago, and so it's scaled more towards today's power. But the last fight, you end up having a lot of lag, a lot of disconnect and desync, where what's going on screen and what is actually happening aren't lining up. For whatever reason with the fight, the main boss is a beholder and summons a bunch of force damaging monsters, and so the beholder goes into an invulnerability stage, and the force damaging monsters are not registering on your screen of them dealing damage or you dealing damage to them, it just sets you up to immediately fall over. I do know of some people who have gone in and bursted the beholder and tried to skip phases, but that relies on a very specific damage team comp comparatively to actually having a strategy to deal with the lag.
It's like nearly one-shotting a Titan.
Yeah, exactly like that.
Yeah.
So a lot of things that are off limits end up being technical limitations as opposed to preparation limitations. You can prepare yourself. There are very few quests, if any, that you can prepare yourself as high as you can go and not complete the quest. You can go in and do Reaver's Fate or Demon Queen. Even those are raids, but because of your preparation, ability to overcome mechanics, Reaver's Fate, if you know the puzzle or pick up a solver, you can get through the puzzle really easily. So then you just have to deal with the elementals. If you have insta-death, high damage, or CC for the elementals, then those are fine. You want to have shield for Reaver's force missiles, and then a high fort save for his disintegrate, and somewhere around 500 HP, so you don't get one shot even if you roll a 1. And once all of those things are clicked off, so long as you're paying attention and really applying yourself to the quest, it is a high stress environment, but one that you know what you're to expect.
Yeah, so the intensity of the quest, you can match it with the intensity of your preparation.
Exactly.
And I would imagine in many instances, the build is also a big deal as far as which build and why that build and how it matches up with the quest or quest line, the raid. And it seems like you've gravitated towards a specific set of builds and committed to those pretty strongly.
Yes. So the characters that I've played, all their races has been Asmir. The self-healing and potential for very defensive racial trees gives amazing benefits. Asmirs get a lay on hands, like a paladin that scales off of wisdom or charisma. And even if you don't put anything into either of them, having a button that you can slam 4 times in a second or 2 seconds and heal for 100 each time is better than nothing. If your character wouldn't have any other self-healing. And so that self-survivability is huge.
Yeah, it sounds like it. I have yet to roll an Aasimar.
And before this, I've only run 1, maybe 2. And every single character I've had 10 rips, and I currently have 3 characters alive. All of them are Asmir, all 13.
It's that big of a deal.
That big. And in the same token, outside of 2 very specific farming tunes where I'm just going for items, one of whom has died and the other whom is I'm still building. All of my classes have been favored soul based. I've had 2 inquisitive favored souls utilizing rogue splashes and intelligence to damage, so I can do rogue trapping and have evasion along with the inquisitive base of a ton of hit points, self-sustaining buffs, and self-healing. And then all of my Reaper experience tunes have been pure favored soul casters for the same reason of self-sustaining, high damage, really good control over engagements.
There is no other caster class that can even compare with the hit points that a favored soul can gain. Is that correct?
Correct. At level 7, you can choose between Purity of Heart or Purity of Soul or Mind. Not sure what it's called because I've never chosen it. Purity of Heart gives you 10 extra HP per favored soul level. So at level 20, you have a raw 200%, or not 200%, 200 hit points just because of your class alone. And that is upwards of 30 to 50% more HP just for your class.
And that doesn't take into consideration any other statistical aspect. It's just class.
Yep. Then you add on percentage-based hit point gain. You add on the self-healing ability. The fact that you have a higher spell point pool than the other divine casters, whether it's a druid or a bard or cleric, you will out heal all of them, and especially in speed's time, you can get out more heals longer and faster.
And that SLA, that lightning bolt,
Sunbeam, Sunbolt.
boy, that thing's a monster, isn't it?
Yeah, early on, you can one-shot close to every single monster. If you're doing Reaper 1, you can one-shot every single Reaper. If you have enough preparation in terms of gear, you can one-shot every single Reaper and monster on Reaper 2, at least the vast majority of them. If you crit, it's easily kills bosses. And the lightning bolt aspect of it allows penetration, which you get multiple targets down. It's not just a single target nuke.
Line them up and mow them down.
Exactly.
And so you can get that. Favorite Soul can get that at. So to fully develop it, you'd have to have 23 points in the tree and be level 3 Favorite Soul, level 4 Favorite.
You have to be level 4, 1 point in, and you don't even have to have 20 points in the tree. You'd have to have 13.
I'm
it's
one tier too high.
It's a tier 3 as opposed to like a sorcerer's tier 2 SLA, like Fire Sorcerer's Scorch. This is just a tier 3.
Oh my gosh.
4-1 is all that you need to have 3 points into it.
Now, I know you've played quite a bit with the pure Favorite Soul using that bolt. Do you find it, I personally, I have one character, my character Faith. Do you find it somewhat basic, or are you cool with it?
The bolt itself?
Just the mechanics of the Favorite Soul, because I played a Favorite Soul when they first came out. I loved it. My second life as Yavul was a Favorite Soul, and just really enjoyed it. But I was, I still was dual wielding swords. I was using green steels. It was kind of an older time. I was wondering for you if when I played this one, I felt like, oh, this is kind of like playing a basic League of Legends character where there's only like 3 buttons to push, and it wasn't. I wouldn't say it was boring or mundane or anything, but it just seemed a little basic.
It's definitely more streamlined now. You choose a role and dedicate yourself to that role, and to do said role efficiently, you maximize your rotation. So for the caster Favorite Soul, the DPS caster, you're on cooldown casting your Sunbolt, your SLA Nimbus of Light, and once you're level 12, your SLA Comet Fall, and you're keeping those on cooldown every single time, dropping a Blade Barrier and then pressing Self Heal. That's 5 buttons, and you have a lot of utility outside of that, whether it's CC or insta death. So you can focus on a lot of different situations when they arise, but as a baseline, you're so powerful that you can steamroll through content with just those limited things. And the same thing goes for a healer Favorite Soul as well. Sit back, you have a simple rotation of, I need to keep these buffs up on myself and a party member to maximize my own healing, their damage, and keep up with as efficient of a mana for the healing spells as possible. It's a lot more streamlined. And that's, especially on hardcore, that's what's needed. You need to definitely push your character to the extremes of what they're doing, because it maximizes the chance of everything working.
Yeah, there is an element of mastery, and having only a set number of abilities to use versus a cleric who has a gazillion. It's really nice to have it more honed in that way. And I have to say, I have my combat log out all the time and it fades out as, when it's not in use. But there's nothing more satisfying than getting a bolt lined up that just says you killed, you killed, you killed, you killed, all in a row, like 5
Yep.
different mobs.
Yep. Being able to kite backwards and just line them up and drop them down, like you said.
So when looking at survivability, when looking at character builds, one of the important parts of this hardcore server has been the survivability of it, of a character. And I think that breaks down into a couple components. One of them is solo survivability, and another one is group survivability, and the role that a character may play within a group versus having to do, having to wear all of the hats in a solo dynamic. How would you say that the pure favored soul is going to work out, um, or which side do you see the pure favored soul being better within?
So, just by nature of groups in DDO, there's no downside to them. The only downside is you're playing with people and they could potentially not understand something and overpull or cause a detriment to the group. But on hardcore specifically, most people will take a much more passive role. And then it becomes an issue of if you're getting too far ahead, if you're confident, and you're confident that your group has your back, you run into an issue there. With the raw builds in general, the favored soul will bring healing just innately by being a divine caster. The single target damage and pseudo AoE if you can set up the bolts. And then once you hit level 12 and get Blade Barrier and Comet Fall, you start to really get some AoE going. And so you're able to really be a jack of all trades within a group dynamic. And that just transfers right into solo as well. You just do all of that, but without the bodies of the group itself.
And how does a pure favorite soul navigate traps and some of the other things?
Yeah, and that's one of the few things that is a little sketchy, and you have to take it very, very safely with traps. When you're doing Reaper traps, they hit really hard, and you have no way to tank them except for avoidance on the hitbox and just raw healing power through them. And so it's a time where it can be a lot more risky, probably the most risky out of any other dynamic.
Yeah, and we're seeing a lot, right now we're seeing a lot of splash artificer and splash rogue to get that trapsmith action going.
Yeah. Yes, yes. That's what you did on your highest tune, right?
Yeah, unfortunately, molybdenum died at 17 yesterday
Oh
to a great
no.
big bomb. Took 730 points of damage. He was sitting at 400 and some change, and that bomb had no save to it in
The siege
Siegebreaker.
breaker. Yeah.
Yeah, and I know these are a couple topics maybe for the future. I know that you have a DDO store boycott for a very valid and specific reason. For me, I have a DDO wiki boycott where I try to grind these quests little by little, and in my better judgment, I will start a quest on normal. Usually, I do them on hard to begin, but sometimes on normal if I'm really unfamiliar with the quest, and then ramp up from there as I get more and more familiar. And I did that most recently with White Plume,
Mm.
which I had never done before. With Siegebreaker, I had done it before, but only as a duo, and it had been several years, and that part of it totally slipped my mind. So I set myself up for failure by not looking at the wiki, not having heeding any warning, and then I actually saw the chain reaction of the exploding barrels go off, and then right as I heard the watch out for the big one, it's right when it blew.
Yeah, and that there are a few quests that the majority of the time, the first time going through, you just aren't prepared. It's just a different mechanic, right? There are very few mechanics like that in the game where if you're within a radius, you're dead. And so on the bright side, you now know, and you said it was years since the last time you'd done it, and uh, I would wager that even years from now, every time you're in Siegebreaker, you will have a concrete moment of these barrels and know exactly why.
Yes, and after putting X amount of hours, 250 quests completed quests into molybdenum, I definitely gleaned that wisdom in a school of hard knocks sort of way.
Yeah. Up until
But
that point,
mhm,
how was molybdenum?
yeah, one of my favorite aspects of that build is, and what it is, it's a two paladin, or excuse me, two rogue, three paladin, and 15 of whatever else that you want to have it type of build. And the two rogue, of course, gives evasion. It gives bonus to the reflex saves right out of the blocks. The three paladin grants the aura and also fear immunity, and then disease immunity as well.
And
So some of the things,
I believe that 3 Paladin, you can also go into its tank tree and get a 20% HP boost and some PRMR that has that availability
yeah,
to it as well.
it really does open up some options there. For me, as a Blade Forged, which I did for that build specifically, um, the immunities are really nice. I mean, they also, Warforged and Blade Forged have some natural immunities, but the fear immunity is really helpful. Um, but but for me, what it is it grants all of the charisma bonus to saves, and then an additional 6 saving throws through the Sacred Defender tree. And so evasion really becomes effective.
Mhm.
And by the time he was up at his full power there, he was right around 40 reflex save. So he was getting through pretty much everything he wanted to. And he was only, he's level 17, so he's doing 13 quests with 40 saves. And that was just going to go up as time went on.
Yeah, it's a really strong base.
Yeah, just over 400 hit points. I didn't have insightful um, constitution going, so that could have gone higher. I would imagine that a 2, 3, 15 with favored soul would just be a monster, because favored soul is going to have +9 across the board with the saving throws, plus all the extra hit points. An extra 150 hit points right there.
And you were
Um,
playing your 15 filler class was a wizard. What was your thought process behind wizard instead of like favorite soul or anything else? What was the rest of your class looking like?
I really liked Wizard because I was really focused on the Inquisitive build and the Alacrity, and so with Reconstruction, it gives 22% attack speed. It gave me the bonuses to Stone Skin, Haste if I wasn't using Reconstruct. It gave me Blur, False Life. Rage didn't work because of the tree, but that's fine. But it gave a lot of options there. And then in addition to that, I could also continue with AoE damage. So it gave me ability to do Ice Storm and Cloud Kill, which is two of my favorite combo spells, and then add in Web there for CC and just stick them. So I'm, taking down as a solo build, it allowed me a lot of versatility as far as crowd control, damage control, damage opportunities, and then being able to just stay alive. And the survivability was, for me, one of my best characters I've ever done until that really big bomb,
Yeah, until a big boom.
which at 730 points of damage, there really is not a lot of classes at level 15 that are going to be able to survive that. So maybe a tank build.
It's yeah, that explosion is pretty much a one shot no matter what your build.
And excuse me, it was a level 17 for that, but nonetheless, it was still a tough one to get through. So
Yeah.
that was just an error on my part for sure.
So the wizard allowed you to have all the utility, and then you capitalized on that utility with the inquisitive base. And this was your first time inquisitive, correct?
How fun was that? Wow, yeah, it was my first time doing an inquisitive build, and then had just recently picked up, and I know that you really focus on getting that as soon as it's available at 12. I was going really focused into the saving throws, and so I didn't pick it up until 17, but I was really
And
enjoying
and,
the damage output.
and that was no holds barred. Can you describe that a little bit and what your first time experiencing it was like?
Well, I think I mentioned to you in chat while you were streaming. I just said this is not fair unless unless you're planning on taking down the Storm Reaver in one go. This really is overkill, and that's what I know that you were encouraging me to use it frequently and use it often. But what I found I was using it for were mini bosses and champions, and just taking them down like nobody's business. It was amazing.
The hot knife through butter. If you're shooting those hot knives out of some dualies.
Oh my goodness. And the rat catcher is just such a solid weapon.
Yep, it is. It is easily the best weapon damage-wise that you can get on hardcore, and then even on live. Once you hit level 8 and you use it all the way up until the only time weapon that I know that overtakes it is the epic version of the Nightshade Shooter from Sharn. The Nightshade Shooter gives a little bit of CC, which can be nice, but the overwhelming power and damage of the Ratcatcher is an old, dated, ridiculous crit profile weapon that just, and then you enhance it more with No Holds Barred, and all of a sudden, just like you said, unless you're taking down the Reaver, it blobbers any monster in any mission.
And the 18 to 20 crit profile instead of a 19 to 20, and the ×3 critical instead of the ×2. Those really make a difference, especially when improved critical gets picked up for improved crit ranged.
Yep, so the improved crit bumps it to 16 through 20.
Probably 15, yeah. 15
Oh, 15.
through
Yeah,
20.
yeah, so 15 through 20, and then the level 12 core for Inquisitive it increases that to 14 through 20, and then changes the ×3 multiplier into a ×4.
Wow.
And all of a sudden, you're critting 65% of the time, 70% of the time.
Big numbers.
Yeah, and then multiplying that by 4. So you can really, really... The damage side isn't a issue, which allowed you to put a lot more points into survivability into your defenses because you had such a strong base.
Yeah, I'm rebuilding Molybdenum. He had an unfortunate situation yesterday where I had got him up to level 4 and stepped right into a trap I didn't see. So it was a quick death, rebuilt him. He's level 5 again. Now his name is Rutherford. Another elemental name. And but I also have one that's I'm building that is a favored soul. So it's going to be the 2/3/15 with a favored soul.
Okay. And
So
are you...
Mhm.
What is the base of that looking like?
It's going to be a caster instead of the inquisitive, though. So it's going to be more focused in on the spell damage, but it's going to have all of the utility that the 2/3 provides.
Okay. I know that a vampire who in this past week fell, and he was number 3 on the Reaper leaderboards with 300,000 Reaper points or Reaper experience.
Yeah.
He was running that build with 3 Paladin for the defenses, and he went 2 Monk. He wasn't about the trapping, but just 2 Monk for the saves.
Mm-hmm.
And then the rest as a caster favored soul base.
Yeah, that sounds super solid because that monk is going to get +3 across the board in the first 2 levels for fortitude, reflex, and will right off the bat.
Mm-hmm. What do you see the strengths of the favored soul and what that's going to bring to the table, and then some of the weaknesses?
I think that it's going to be akin to yours with the pure favored soul. It's going to have spell points for days. It's going to have the SLAs that are very effective, especially the bolt. It's going to have, at level 15, it'll have 3 6-level spells, so it'll have heal and blade berry available. Just the hit point survivability, and overall, I think +9 across the board as far as the saving throws. It's a charisma-based character, so it's easy to get the charisma saves from the paladin levels as well.
Mm-hmm.
That won't be an issue.
And the extra lay on hands.
Precisely, the extra amount of healing that will provide. So all in all, it's going to be, I think, a more well-rounded dynamic. The one downside to it is it doesn't have a way to avoid direct damage. You have to really focus in on the PRR, MRR type stuff because it doesn't have displacement, it doesn't have blur, it doesn't have stone skin. It will have stalwart pact, which he will provide a little bit of help if the character gets below 50%.
Right.
And it does have inherent death ward with the spell there too, which is nice.
On that sort of mitigation level of defense, at level 17, the favorite soul gets wings and is able to, like an abundant step like ability. But that's at 17, and because you're doing the 5 levels of rogue paladin split, you won't be getting that. And that also postpones when you're getting that blade barrier, that heal, those higher level, really impactful spells, assuming that you're taking your rogue and paladin levels early. How's your leveling split looking?
Yeah, and with my wizard build, I took first level was paladin, second level was wizard, third level rogue, fourth level rogue, fifth and sixth are paladin. So I'm not even hitting my second level of wizard until level 7, and then the rest are wizard levels from that point forward. So it definitely delays that impact. Luckily, with so much survivability, and at least for the wizard build, the inquisitive build is not relying upon the spells for damage, it's relying upon it for defenses. That's helpful. With the favorite soul, that might be more of a problem as a spell-based character. As an inquisitive build, I think it would be just fine as well. The spells definitely will be impacted by that because we won't see a 6th level spell until level 17, for example.
Right.
So the vast majority of the stuff. And so I think as a late bloomer build, it's looking at playing into the epics with that power spike more so than 17 is going to be a very strong level, and then we're looking into the epics for the full power of the build.
Okay. And so what is your goal for this build? What are you trying to accomplish?
Well, I was at 2980 favor, and I was just getting ready to break that 3000 with Siegebreaker. So I would have been 60% of my way to the 5000 favor. So that ultimately was my goal as a solo build, just playing on my own to get up to 5000 favor. Not doing the Reaper chain just yet, Reaper angle, and time-wise might become a problem because we're less than 5 weeks away from the end of the season.
Right. November
Um,
16th.
Right. So for me, it's going to be about hitting that 5,000 favor and being sustainable up until that point, which I anticipate to try to get somewhere around level 23,
Okay.
skipping a few of the difficult, hard to solo ones.
Yeah, definitely. That's like the rogue base is what I used as my first tune to get 5,000. I went rogue, favored soul, and inquisitive. And so taking out some of those favorite soul levels to putting in paladin is just exactly the build that you're going. And I think it's going to be really, really strong for yourself. And I'm just doing everything on elite 4 levels above. It's been proven that is a very strong strategy to get that favor.
And yours was the inquisitive, 2 rogue, 18 favored soul. Is that right? Or did you do 1 fighter in there too?
I did 1 fighter, and that was to get improved precise shot early. In retrospect, I shouldn't have done that because now my tune is sitting at 19 with 5,000 favor and is 16 favored soul, 1 fighter, 2 rogue. And the 1 fighter is only
Oh,
giving a couple extra action boosts for no holds barred, but I lose the defenses, that big defense mitigation with wings. And I didn't know at the time that I wasn't going to be able to take 20 because of the Reaper lockout. You can only do
that's right.
quests 4 levels above. And so that was a lack of knowledge on my part. If I were to go back, I would remove the fighter level and take it at 20.
And with Nubacabra right there at 5,000, 36 or something like that, is there something that you're waiting for with that tune, or is your character there permanently going to be a 19?
I may Right now my focus is on Reaper and getting the Reaper pet, the Mortality Reaper pet. And once I get that, I'll be doing a check to see if I want to push leaderboards, to see if I want to try to have 2 toons in 5,000, which is what my Reaper toon is shaping up to be. And for the time being, at level 19, I'm able to farm Sharn and really make sure I have a 15 power spike for that Reaper toon. I just lost my level 16 Reaper toon to some Blades, I believe.
Oh, no.
and Blades and Demon Assaults, and just walked right along with them. About 1 second, suddenly 700 HP gone.
Those are the Archon quests, correct?
Right, and those, much like the quests, the level 6 quests in the 12 or White Plume, any of the sort of newer and more scaled content can be really scary. And so I think I was doing Reaper 2 and was just going through A-OK, and the Blades just clobbered me. There's just so many risks.
If I recall correctly, I think you even called that, like, before you started those quests, you're like, oh, and the Arca ones are a little bit rippy. And
Yep.
might have to check on that. But
And I went back to my previous toons when I did those, because I had a level 19 Reaper toon. And when I went through the Archon's quest, I played ridiculously safe. I was nowhere near the Blades. I wasn't even in the area. I was kiting mobs of distance back to me just to avoid that. And so I just got confident within the build. I was feeling good, having best in slot gear that I could get, and overconfident. It's just got the better of me.
you just spoke about best in slot gear. How important is that to you?
For me, it is very important. I find that preparing myself, taking the time to pre-prepare, is key, just for hedging my bets as much as possible. If someone with just the random generated gear that they find, and then you compare that to getting the best in slot gear, you'll have a ridiculous amount more hit points, defenses, offensive capabilities, overall survivability, and that's the name of the game on hardcore. And so having that level 19 able to farm Sharn and get that gear has been a really big boon, and that's why he's been sitting there for 6 weeks now.
And what type of research do you have to do, or how did you determine what best in slot and what makes an item so desirable?
Yeah, so there's a rough way to do it. Ultimately, it comes down to personal preference, what you value. I try to get as much out of my gear as possible, and so I'll look at core sets. So for Sharn or for Ravenloft, looking at the Adherents of Ravenloft set, looking at the caster set if you're a caster, the damage double shot set if you're an inquisitive. For Ravenloft, for Sharn, it's the same thing. Sharn is a little bit more specific. So I have a specific Favored Soul caster set as my base, and then I build around that, trying to get my PRR, my MRR, any quality or insightful spell damage, my crit for my main Radiance, my crit for my kinetic lore, which is for Blade Barrier, and all the main stats that I want. Strength, so you don't get enfeebled and become helpless, which is what cost my level 19 Reaper toon.
Yeah.
Con for just straight HP. Your main stat for your DCs, for me, it is Wisdom. Getting quality on all those. So I'll have an orb that'll give me 3 quality Wisdom, and I'll have a goggles that'll give me 3 quality Con. And
those stack with everything else.
Right. It doesn't stack with other quality bonuses of its own type. So a 2 quality and a 3 quality wouldn't stack. It would just take the highest. And so taking all that time to really flush out what that looks like, and then just never having to worry about my gear again, is really nice. It allows you to just focus on surviving within the game. It's one element that's removed.
Yeah, and having that level of gear makes it so the chance of survivability within the game heightens with each extra piece.
Exactly.
I know for Molly, I only lost 2 items that were named gear. I lost my rat catcher, and I lost the belt that gives 20 vitality. I think it's from Giant Hold. It's a pretty insignificant belt, and I think it
Gotcha.
has the fists for a monk fists on it. But I did lose 12 custom crafted items as well
And
that I had just.
those are almost on par with named gear because Caneth Crafting is the base of like named gear, and Caneth Crafting will be equivalent. Named gear may have a little bit of extra stats or whatnot, but they are equivalent in those two uh, prefix suffixes, and so that is a pretty big loss.
It was, and the farming for it too. The farming is a little grindy, but the nice thing about Kenneth Craft farming is that collectibles don't ransack, which is really nice.
It is really nice. I've ransacked many a quest in Sharn and not gotten my gear. You're just waiting a week until the next time you can do that.
And and because you're not using astral shards, you don't have the opportunity to re-roll because every chest a person opens that's a non-raid chest, there's an opportunity to spend 3 to 5 astral shards depending on the level, re-roll that chest, and it can be re-rolled up to 4 times.
Yeah, 4 total, 3 rerolls. So you
Yeah.
get to see four chest opens of loot, if you will.
Yeah, and if it's a 33%, say it's elite and 33% chance of getting a named item, then that's offering 4 attempts at 33%. So generally one will drop within 4 rolls.
Yep, and then there's potentially 5 items per chest. So on average, you run the quest 5 times and reroll every single time, and you should see the entire span of the named loot on average.
That I know that for you the Astral Shards dynamic isn't one that you're using on hardcore.
Yeah, we touched on that a little earlier with the advantages and pushing those, right? In the same way of spending time to get those named items, you can then further do that and get those named items faster with Astral Shards. Same thing goes with anything on the DDO store. That 3 quality from those named items, 3 quality Constitution is a lot of HP. Why not pick up a +7 or +8 Supreme Tome and have that for all of it base on top of it, on top of the quality, right? And it becomes, it treads the line of pay to win and the competitive environment. And I think both of those are something that I'm very connected and have a stance on. The past 2 years, 2.5 years, I've played, no, 3 years now, goodness. I've played games competitively, mostly first-person shooters, and been within the professional environment there. So I'm really connected with that competitive aspect, and utilizing anything other than a baseline to gain an advantage is not competitive innately. Cheating is not competitive. You're using something that is beyond yourself, right? Instead of sitting down and training your aim or understanding what you're doing, you're skipping that and doing something that no person can do. And in the same way, connecting that to DDO, in the competitive environment, there's a leaderboard in hardcore, so it is a competitive environment that being able to pay for bonuses, pay to win effectively. Even with the downside of losing your character and losing all of that, all the resources put in.
Yeah, it makes complete sense. And, Standing Stones has allowed this as their pilot. It'll be interesting to see what the company chooses to do with the second league, if there happens to be a second league down the road.
Right.
As far as the hardcore server, they probably made pretty good amount of chunk change off this, and so that's going to benefit them and their survivability as well.
Exactly. And I don't have an issue with them making money off of it. I think that like the base game itself, I don't consider pay to win. I think it's pay to convenience. You can get +8 tomes from raids. You don't have to buy a Supreme Tome off the DDO store and pay money for it. You can play the Shard auction house, the Astral Exchange, and build up a stack of Astral Shards on the main server. But on the hardcore server, there is I would not be surprised if no one ran Shroud or no one ran any legendary raid at all.
Hmm.
because of the risk associated with it. It's just not worth it. And at that point, when you can no longer get those tomes, those +8 tomes, even if in a single stat, even if you have to spend months and months and months grinding those raids to get those tomes, if that is no longer available, then it is immediately you're paying for power that is unobtainable otherwise. And so that's hard for hardcore within the competitive environment and the competitive scope. If Standing Stone Games came out and said, hey, this is a fun experience, this is a fundraising experience. If you enjoy this, putting energy into a part of the game that is mostly lost. The game is 13 years old, and power creep and overall accumulation of items and such is just so prevalent on the live servers. Having that pure wipe and the artificial slowing down of gameplay, because if you die, you have to restart, which is all amazing. I've loved my entire time on hardcore. It's the reason that I put so much time into it. The aspect of the competitive side is rough. If they come out and say it's a fundraiser, I have no issue, right? I don't have an issue using the store, using the Astral Shard exchange, because it is no longer framed in a competitive mindset, right? It is now framed properly in my eyes. And that
It's more of an acknowledgement at that point versus there's a winner, a clear-cut winner.
exactly. And you can make the argument, oh, it's about the experience. And in that, the counter to that is then there shouldn't be a leaderboard. You should be able to show off what you're able to show off and use that as your acknowledgement. In that same way, they did just change the Bloody Footsteps, which up until 3 days ago, as of this recording, was client side only, and now it is visible for everyone.
So people get to flex a little bit.
Exactly. Which is really good. And if there are issues with lag and issues with framing and all of that, then definitely remove it. I don't have an issue with that not being visible if it's negatively impacting the game. But if it's not doing that, then it's a acknowledgement of the time and energy that the person has put in.
And the economist in me would love to see behind the scenes as far as the numbers. I would love, once the leaderboards are locked in at the end of the season, and is it the top 100 that are shown?
Yep.
I would love to see how many of those accounts that are associated with those characters on both the Reaper leaderboard and the Favor leaderboard linked how much DDO points, how many DDO points they spent relative to their position, and see if there's some type of relationship there. It would not surprise me if in many instances there was.
I completely agree.
But taking that out of the equation for a moment, what other aspects do you think that those top 20 people will have available? What do you think there will be any commonalities amongst those top 20 or top 100 people as far as why they were so successful, assuming remove the DDO store out of the equation?
I think within the top 20 specifically, static groups, seeing how many times they played with a specific other person or people. I think that group dynamic, because you don't get any downside for running with 6 people, and it's just pure safety, whether it's more firepower, more spread defenses and utility, that the recipe for success is having a group that you run with and only with that group. If you want to take a risk and do things solo, then there will be a clear-cut risk that is being taken.
And how about with pugs versus, pickup groups versus the static group? What do you see there?
Pickup groups, it's an agreement that you guys are all there, and the goal is to complete the quest. Everyone has a different thought process on how to do that, whether it's a faster, more Zerg-based, group mobs up and nuke them down, whether it's a pull very, very safely, one at a time, take your time, look at the screen, look at your other screen and see, we have the wiki map up, look back at the screen and go, okay, I'm right there. And then, if the traps are, keep yourself really relative, take your time. And generally it's not as communication based. You may get a Reaper call here or there, but it's not as, okay, we're going to the next pack, not as streamlined. On the other side of that, the static groups are much more confident and competent just innately by playing with the same people. You not only get a group and team dynamic going where you understand how someone plays and why they choose to play away. They can understand that with you as well.
And just going into a quick touch of psychology, there's an individual named Bruce Tuckman, and he created a theory in group formation. And the steps of that were the forming moment, the storming moment, the norming moment, the performing moment, and then the adjourning moment. So you have forming, storming, norming, performing, and adjourning, which is what that group has done. And the idea behind it is that a group is going to have to go through some tough times in order to actually find their norm. And the static group has done that. Whereas a pickup group, there's the chance that the group is going to get a little spread out and work in ways that doesn't work for the betterment of the group. There's a lot more self-interest involved, it sounds like.
Mhm.
And then there's also a lot of how comfortable people are, competency conversations happening within that group dynamic as well.
Right. And then, especially with the adjourning stage, you can go from doing a quest with a random group, and then after that quest, everyone leave, or within that quest itself, someone dies, and that's immediate end of the journey. You will probably not see that person again unless you die and paths line up again.
And you guys are walking the Korthos walk of shame once again.
Exactly. As compared to a static group, which if someone dies, they now have a clear cut, hey, I need to get back up to this point, and you will most likely see them again. You can have the other people in the static group help that person get back up with items, with playing on alternate tunes, whatever it may be. And then if no one does die at the end of a quest, you guys are all on the same page going to the next quest. And if at the end of the day you've gotten chunk of favor, chunk of Reaper experience in, end of the day comes along and you now can go, cool, see you guys tomorrow. And
Right.
that consistency is key.
And having been part of a static group on Live years ago, back when the game first came out, and working within the guild and having characters devoted to just specific people that I played with, yeah, I definitely see the values and benefits of that. Everybody's for each other, with each other, picking each other up, catching each other up, um, and then with the pickup group, there's always that chaos that is involved in it.
Right. And that's like I haven't had a static group. I've met people that I've never met on my main server because they're from different servers, or if I have met them on the main server, it's been just brief interactions. I haven't had a static group or a strict group of friends that I'm like, hey, at this time, let's get on, let's do this. But I have met like others that I've mentioned, and just randomly find people while I'm leveling. I'll be going through level 10 quests, and someone else will be going through level 10 quests, and then we'll play throughout the day, and we'll be on a pseudo synced schedule. So it's an impromptu static group, if you will. There's no binding like, hey, let's be on at this time the next day. It's whenever we're on and both playing, we'll group up.
Yeah, and as a professional broadcaster working on Twitch, with your Nubacabra channel, that makes a lot of sense. It's not like you're going to be able to find 6 to 12 like-minded individuals that you can create a static group on from the time you start to the time you end, and be on for 8 to 11 hours a day,
Right.
every day.
It's definitely a issue that you have to overcome, and a way to do that is within that subsect of time that I am playing, there's a smaller section that's carved out for a specific static group on a specific character, which splits up your time but gives you that more consistent survivable environment with that group.
That's a great point. So even on the hardcore server, having multiple characters going, each of them with a specific role, and some of them linked to specific static groups.
Yeah, exactly.
My character Faith, she's coming up, and she's my first female character I've ever made. So it's a lot of fun to work, and she's a drow. Currently one rogue and 9 favored soul, and she's a spellcaster favored soul. So I do have that trap ability, but she only runs with pointy ears, my guildie, and no other time. other than maybe some occasional loot runs
Yeah,
for
some farming.
specific items. Yeah.
Because I've lost 10 tunes now. I've made two of those being farming tunes. I have a level 13 farming tune that's not going to go anywhere. She's sitting at level 13 and farms Ravenloft for me. And if I ever die again in the 1 to or the 6 to 9 range, I will be making another farming tune and parking them at level 10 to farm out those level 6 12 quests.
Those are
And
great quests.
they're really unique and they're a really big power spike. We're talking about items like how you prioritize them and what they give to you. The 12 quests are a really big power spike, so level 6 items from those quests. The Ravenloft chain, again, very big power spike, a lot of on par gear. We're able to get a ton, great set bonuses. And then Sharn is the next big power spike, so at level 6, 10, and 15 respectively.
And with regard to those, to the Ravenloft and to the Sharn, those are the two most recent expansions. And I've heard, I pay attention to the forums on occasion, and one of the big requests that I've seen consistent throughout the years that's never happened is, and it's the allocation of time, energy, and effort to put out new content versus doing just a huge quality of life update. Where do you stand on that right now?
So, for those players that have played for 13 years, they're so connected to the game that new content is a big aspect of it. They've done everything the game has to offer. And if they're still playing, the new content really provides a new horizon for them to reach for. Even players that have played for just a large chunk of time, maybe not the entire time, 7 years, 5 years, when you start getting into the years of playing, the new content really becomes important to keep the game sort of new and fresh for them. At the same time, this is where I stand. You have to have a functional game, and there are a lot of issues with GDO. There's a lot of lag issues. I know I personally suffer from some sort of lag issue that I don't see around a whole lot, where monsters will just be completely desynced from my screen, especially as more and more I gather more and more up and try to AoE them down. And it's a crapshoot whether I'm alive or dead most of the time. And so that is nigh unplayable, and I cannot play in raids, in high level raids. Once you have 12 people bashing on one monster for 3 seconds, the entire game locks up for me.
Yeah, it's bad enough in kind of a big deal where those little bee sting traps, as they're called, can actually take players down because of the major lag spike.
Right. If you're just stuck there on your screen, you can't move. You're trying to, but nothing is happening. Can't do anything. In the same way, just this for the game health itself on individual parts, it's like, yeah, you can go. And kind of a big deal. I know this isn't a problem, and try to work around it. I can try to make workarounds for my own lag issues. I'm trying to get them fixed. Ideally, it'd be great if they were gone, but you can make workarounds for them. A workaround that cannot be made is general server lag. Standing Stone Games was are the developers of Dungeons and Dragons Online way back in the day. The publisher was Turbine, and Standing Stone bought DDO away from Turbine. So now they are the sole owners of it, which has a lot of power. And at the same time, they are an indie team working with a game that was not an indie title on its first release. And so there are a lot of scaling issues that are going on. The total servers that they have allocated to keep the game worlds up struggle, or you cannot have too many people on a singular server, otherwise it will be unplayable. That's the issue with a server merge and why you can't have another one. They did one way back in the day.
Mm-hmm.
And now if they did a server merge and condense the servers down, they would just be strictly unplayable. There's a limit to playable people at any given time on any server, and that inhibits growth of the game. And once you put a cap like that on, something has to be done, or you have to accept that that is within just the scope of the game and a reality.
And I know that they've done their best with instances. Sometimes on popular days, the marketplace will have 2 or 3 instances, and so you get put into an instance within the server that you're on. So that helps a little bit, but there is definitely a capacity issue there, isn't there?
Yeah. And that's been an interesting note on hardcore is that it it has a lot, it's very populated, and there isn't as much server lag, at least while the majority of the players are still leveling to 20. There isn't as much endgame rating, isn't as much actions and just stuff happening.
Yeah, the number of particles have been reduced because so much of what we've accumulated over the years, like a bunch of hoarders that we are, in DDO, is not there. So those particles are not being accounted for. They don't need to be accounted for.
Right. And you can see where the contrast of that is on the live servers. Myself and Yavul here come from Galanda, which is the biggest rating and endgame server there is. And if you simply just mirror all of your characters, like within one rating guild, just go to Kyber or go to Kenneth or just another server, there will be a noticeable amount of lag that is just not present due to general population on that server. And so the groupings of those players has an effect.
So it sounds like that quality of life, focusing in on playability, stability, um, working with stress tests and population loads would really, really be beneficial from your perspective.
I think so. I think the game itself, it's 13 years old. It's dated. It's not as big as a simple comparison as Blizzard's World of Warcraft came out
Mhm.
around the same time. When it first came out, when World of Warcraft first came out, there were issues of like, two people or two guilds, two groups of 40-man raids couldn't fight the boss on the same server at the same time. Otherwise, it would crash the server, right? It would become unplayable. And as time has gone on, Blizzard is just such a big company and has made so much money around that they've been able to scale the game farther. And DDO, while it scales content wise, it hasn't scaled very well in the back end. They don't have a super dedicated coder that's constantly updating and changing the back end of it. And so a release of DDO 2, even if it's just a straight everything that's currently in DDO mirrored over to a new game on a new engine and has a much better back end, would increase, it's a ton of time, energy, funds, and commitment to that, but it would be, if it's possible, it'd be strictly better.
But please, please, please don't turn it into a click and wait game. I mean, they also have LOTRO, Lord of the Rings Online, and Lord of the Rings Online follows the path of World of Warcraft and EverQuest and Star Wars: The Old Republic and all of these click and wait games where the character, you lose all of the maneuverability, flexibility that the character has, whereas DDO plays more inside the genre of many of the war games where they have the ability to jump and dodge and tumble and do these amazing things that makes DDO such a unique MMORPG.
I can completely agree. I think that the that aspect of DDO is not seen anywhere else in any other MMO. You're not grounded. You're able to maneuver and use your environment, which poses its own problems. You have what safe spots, cheese spots inside of quests that you can sit there and abuse enemy AI and abuse your verticality to get up somewhere that an enemy cannot.
Sure.
That's something that has to be noted and dealt with if it isn't intended or wanted. But removing that availability to go up to a high ground position, get up on some boxes, grounds the game so much more and takes away a lot of the life that's within the game.
Absolutely. And one of the aspects of Dungeons and Dragons, true to form, the pen and paper game is the ability to use one's environment, one's terrain, and the natural resources as well as the artificial resources to one's advantage. So there's the reason why a tower shield is so beneficial, because it can be turned into a mini wall and shot around. And there's a reason why height can help. and not condoning exploitation. If a mob bugs out because you're in a certain spot, that isn't necessarily the optimal way to play this game, but it is nice to have the third dimension involved in it as
Yeah,
far as verticality.
looking at just a simple interaction, improved precise shot, which allows you to take your ranged weapon and pierce through enemies. If you are a half orc or purple dragon knight and you're very tall, you shoot down at enemies, and
Mhm.
that path of the arrow shoots into the ground. Comparatively, if you're a halfling or a gnome and you shoot at an enemy, you may shoot parallel or even up, and that allows you to pierce infinitely as opposed to a strict, like, it will hit the ground at some point.
Right. Yeah, using the mechanics to our advantage for sure.
Yeah.
From a quality of life perspective, I would love to see the loot tables change on a regular basis. We had a big update to the loot tables. The power creep got involved in it, and we all of a sudden had Vorpals coming at our ears, for example. But we lost Banishers and we lost Disruptors. I think it would be nice from a longitudinal perspective that once a year they do a loot update where they change the tables and what some of those, some things go into rotation, some things get pulled out of rotation. And then also the old quests with the old in rewards, that those get updated and refreshed to a certain level, not necessarily pushing the power creep, but at least bringing them up to the current standard.
Right, and they do go back and do passes on raids and quests to try to update those every so often. But I definitely agree that a more seasonal based update schedule could be very beneficial. And I think it touches on a really interesting point of this, like, what do you do with the game as it stands? What can you do? Content, quality of life, re-release it. And that's really looking at hardcore and what it's done and what taking that and running would do with, you use DDO as a base game, but then you do a seasonal. Every 3 months is a new league. It's a new wipe, new leaderboards. You remove pay to win aspects. You really have people, commit to the competitive side, commit to, achieving the goals of, getting number one, getting in top 20, just achieving the cosmetics. And every 3 months you're able to do those passes of, hey, this last league, a big issue was loot, right? Was early on there were so many quests that were more dated, and loot scaling just wasn't as powerful, or it was too powerful. Vorpals, you got one, and then until you got your best in slot damage weapon, you used a Vorpal. And
Yeah.
so scaling that and turning it into much more of a Path of Exile-esque game, but in an MMO base, I think could be absolute killer.
It'd be a lot of fun. I hope, and the numbers would reveal, which I will probably never get to see the numbers as much as I would be chomping at the bit to see them.
Yeah.
I would hope that they don't necessarily do a season every 3 months, because the server populations for everything else probably have dropped significantly with the hardcore server up. I'd be concerned, and maybe that would help with lag, and maybe that'd help with some of the issues on those servers. But um, I think it would be nice to do a 3 month season, take 3 months off, have another 3 month season, take 3 months off, and be able to make sure that the core servers are still populated, still vibrant, and that some of those main ideas, main quest concepts and objectives that we have on those main servers are continuing on without the risk of losing some of the neat stuff that this hardcore server is providing.
Yeah, the player base would definitely become split if you had a hardcore seasonal game and then the base game of Dungeons and Dragons for a completely different environment, completely different game, and just using DDO as a base and this experience of hardcore. That could be an option, but I completely agree. Splitting that community has detriments, and that is something that I've heard a lot of from players who didn't enjoy hardcore or left back to their main servers after the first week or so. Is that sometimes the servers seem dead. There are no LFMs up. Their rating and guild dynamics are thrown out of sync because you have people that are playing hardcore and others that are not.
Yeah, in the last month and a half, I've sold 3 items on the auction house on on Galanda. And I spent a lot of time doing it on the auction house, and on hardcore, I've probably sold 500. So
Yeah. Yeah.
it's definitely been, yeah, it definitely has its pros and cons in that regard. But I do applaud Standing Stones for taking this venture and putting it into action. And even though there is some controversy whether things like the DDO store and Astral Shard should be available, whether people should be rewarded for spending the most money by, getting their name put on the leaderboard emblazoned forever, those questions definitely will need to be kicked down the road a little bit and looked at.
Hmm.
DDO is not going to have a capture the flag like World of Warcraft does. DDO is not going to become a MOBA. DDO, you're not going to see DDO chess, like Dota chess, and you're not going to see a lot of different formats that DDO just isn't compatible with. You're not going to see a DDO battle royale. It just doesn't work with character dynamics. But this hardcore server and the idea of moving it closer to Path of Exile and Diablo and having these different seasons, this seems to be working.
I completely agree. Like they're definitely clear cut concerns, like you mentioned, with the store, with immortalizing names, and how does that reflect on that given time. As a whole, this has been an amazing success, and how I view it, I would much rather that they did this and concerns are addressed later than not do it and try to keep going with what has been happening with DDO. And while I don't have the numbers, the game is definitely less popular than it was years ago, in the first 4 years at least. Innovating and taking steps like they did with the free to play model, when DDO is one of the first MMOs, if not the first, to introduce a free to play model. And then they just have sat on it for a long time and not done a whole lot to innovate. And so taking those steps that can jut it into a bigger spotlight is amazing.
You've heard it now, Standing Stones. We have Nubacabra here that is willing to be part of the research and development team to be the innovator of the free-to-play model to turn it into a cash cow for you by establishing valuable cosmetics, valuable not pay-to-win items, and other things that will really make a difference in Dungeons and Dragons Online.
Players will buy cool looking pieces of gear. What can I say?
It's so true. I want the armor from the Blade Forged creation quest. Right at the beginning, that dude's got the coolest armor. I mean, Blade Forges get the fun spiky cosmetic, but the main creator in there, oh man, that armor is bomb.
Yeah, the quarry and all of that environment has always had a really unique aesthetic to it.
Oh, I'm glad that they added goggles back in the day. It's been a few years now, and I'm glad that they most recently added cloaks. So they're making a difference. They're setting up the tables for these types of customizable things.
Mhm.
Because
I
now
think
we have
I think the
Go ahead.
mirrors of glamoring as well, when those were first introduced, were a big turning point where we're on the cosmetic side. You were able to take items that are in game and simply, copy their look, and that suddenly took every single item within the game and made it a cosmetic that you
Made it valuable, even though it may not have actual playable value. It still has cosmetic value.
right. And that difference was really big, and it also introduced a dynamic of, do we introduce or do we add a strict cosmetic on the store that looks completely different than everything else in the game, that's super jazzed up and super spicy, or do we just add more content into the game and then let people use the mirrors to copy those looks, which is
Yeah,
it's a back and forth.
it is, and I think it should be both, definitely, because it's nice to be able to achieve those items, get them without paying for them. But I think just as any other successful MO or a successful free-to-play game system is, You look at League of Legends, for example, you get some of those legendary cosmetics. I have Elementalist Lux, and I love that. And it evolves throughout the game. And that's a $20 skin.
Yeah, just for a
and
look.
just for a look, and DDO could have that 100% if they wanted, and just have people throwing dollar bills right at them.
Right. You can do something that's percentage based off of total kills in a quest. A quest has 100 monsters, and after you kill 20 of them, suddenly you get some horns on your head, and after you kill 50 of them, all of a sudden you get a tail, and then after 80 are down, you get wings that sprout from your back and are flapping around.
It's like a Kha'Zix evolution there. Love it.
Exactly. On the store and Astral Shard market, we've talked about the store a fair amount. Let's focus on the Astral Shard market, because Astral Shards are used to reroll chests, like we've talked about, but then also on the market itself, which is a split from the normal Platinum auction house. And so you're able to put value on, or put value on a currency that isn't used for anything else but re-rolling, really. With that, it is server based. Hardcore Astral Shards will only be on hardcore Astral Shards, so unless you invest them into something through the auction house or spend them re-rolling chests, they will only influence those items, and those can then be taken over. But inherently in themselves, Astral Shards are just there. And so what has been your experience with the Shard auction house, since I haven't done anything with it?
So yeah, you have a great point. That's in 30 plus days, 33 days from now, those Astral Shards will be absolutely worthless. You can't take them with you. Astral Shards come from a few different sources, and it's kind of a similar argument as far as like DDO points. If we hit 100 favor, we get 25 DDO points. If it's the first time on the server, you get an extra 50, an extra 100. So there's some DDO points built into the server itself based on favor, and as we're leveling up our characters, we're going to accumulate some DDO points. Now, Astral Shards are a little bit more challenging, but every day we get a silver die roll, and once a week we get a gold die roll for the majority of the VIPs who aren't part of the 1 year special dynamic.
Mm-hmm.
And those sometimes can have Astral Shards. In addition to that, Monster Manuals can drop Astral Shards. On occasion, there used to be a time in which Astral Shards could come out of chests. Now, I haven't personally seen that, but there is discussion about that. So Astral Shards don't necessarily have to come from the DDO store. They can be found organically through the game. Astral Shards, on average, are about 15 to 20,000 plat on their relevant worth, platinum. It varies from server to server, I would imagine, and I don't quite know what the scale is here on the hardcore server. But they are quintessential to certain aspects of being successful, and one of them is guild formation and creation and maintenance. There are only some of the hold rooms you can maybe find in a random loot drop. You might be able to see one up on a DDO store, or not the DDO store, but the auction house.
Mm-hmm.
But for the most part, you're only going to be able to buy them through Astral Shards. And that's kind of that boundary again. It's like, are you using the DDO store to buy the Astral Shards? How are you getting the Astral Shards? And then as far as the auction house, a lot of times some of the higher quality items get put into the Astral Shard exchange. And you'll see a lot more of the filigree, more of the higher level ingredients, and some very nice quality items as well.
Like a planar gird, for example.
Right, yeah, but there hasn't been a gird on the auction house in a few weeks. At least I haven't found one. I look every day.
Mm-hmm. I have mine hoarded that is stashed away.
Yeah. So I like the idea of having, it's kind of like a Bitcoin. It has a sense of different sense of value. It is somewhat attached to the DDO, or to the auction house, excuse me, in the sense that there is a pretty, you can't. There is a bit of a ratio between platinum and astral shards as a rule of thumb, but it's not concrete.
Yeah, they have different uses than platinum.
Well, especially since platinum only goes up to 2 million as far as the cap on an item.
Hmm.
That's 100 astral shards. Some items are more valuable than that, I guess you could say. And so that provides an opportunity for those items to be placed as well.
Right. It puts that alternate price tag on an item, and how it plays into the environment, right? A selling, getting a gird, and going, hey, what can I do with 2 million platinum versus what can I do with 100 astral shards, right? Does that gird suddenly enable you to get more because you're able to reroll chests? Does it allow you to gear out your characters more with like utility, with potions, with wands? And how much impact does that have?
As a solo player of a very small guild that only has 3 guild members currently in it, with the smallest guild ship, I did purchase 200 astral shards so that I could buy a 50 and 150, I believe they were, as far as actually one was 150. And then I made enough on the auction house to purchase second 150 hold room.
Mhm.
Um, I've made probably about 1,000 astral shards total now. I've spent probably 300 of them on rerolls. So doing loot runs, farming
Yep.
to get items, and I'm sitting at about 400 and a quarter right now. So I took my 200 astral shard investment. I've made about 1,000 off of them. I've gotten the things I need for my ship. I've gotten some named items to help me along the way, and it's been very beneficial.
Yeah, 100%. You cannot deny the benefit of them. And I've indirectly benefited from astral shards as well, whether it's I'm playing with loot runs with someone who is rerolling and gets an item off of one of their rerolls and passes it to me because they don't need it, but they don't want to reroll the item. Whether like I'm in the biggest guild that there is on the server, Open Guild for All, and the owner of that who runs Open Guild for All and Open Guild for All 2 dropped a ton of astral shards to get the biggest ship, to get all the amenities, and keeps everything up to date. And so it's an environment that it is very difficult to be purist in. I don't personally partake, but I still benefit from that environment.
Yeah, you can't live in a vacuum in this situation because you'd either have to be like no guild running solo.
Right.
And that's just suicide on the hardcore server.
It's definitely difficult. Definitely difficult to achieve the highest statuses while doing that. It
Yeah.
does pose an interesting question, which I don't think there's a right or wrong answer. More of just a conversation to have with it. Of and the same thing goes to the DDO store. You said you've gotten enjoyment out of that astral shards out of those astral shards, right? And
Yeah.
so you could put a monetary value on that enjoyment, and if people have the funds available to spend on that, then should they be able to, comparatively to myself, which I made an active choice to not spend, and by doing that I've run hundreds of Sharn quests to farm at least 100 and seen several hundred chests opened and people rolling through for named loot to achieve items for that enjoyment, right? And so there's a time aspect on the other side. How much can you pay for enjoyment versus how much time do you need to dedicate for that same reward?
It's a great point. And, for myself personally, um, working a couple jobs, going to school, raising kids, only have X amount of time dedicated to any given week to enjoy this game that I've enjoyed for the last 13 and a half years and almost 14 now. WoW Beta, came out in like December of 2005.
Yep.
So um, for me, it does allow a little bit more ease so that I don't have to run that 12 quest. I can run it to ransack, but I also get the 3 extra rerolls.
Yeah.
And so instead of 7 opportunities, I'm getting 28
That's 3 weeks into a single day.
precisely. And so that makes a huge difference. I do appreciate a stance like yours where you're doing it with a specific mindset. You know, and you luckily have an opportunity to have the time to be able to farm it for better and for worse as far as whether you get the item or not,
Right.
because it's part of your work.
Hmm.
Um, but I would imagine that, yeah, if a person has the funds available and maybe not necessarily the time, it does offer a good alternative.
Yeah, I don't think that that in itself is it treads a line on the pay to win aspect, and the gaming community as a whole is very against pay to win. Arcade
Sure.
right now is relaunching with a completely separate model than it had up until this point because it got into such a pay to win aspect that the game died. It got stopped being played. At least here in the States. In Korea, it's a little bit different of an environment, but here in the States specifically, pay to win is not looked fondly upon. So the difference in dynamic there is one thing. My stance is mostly built around the competitive aspect. If they didn't have a leaderboard, I don't think there would be an issue. Then you just have the, is pay to win a model that is sustainable for the broader game. And so, like I said, if they go, hey, this is a fundraiser, that's that, and remove the leaderboard, then I have no issue with people choosing to pay for that enjoyment because it's a PvE game and it's seasonal. And so there's a sort of pseudo limit, it borders a line. Pay to win is still something that I'm, pretty vehemently against, but I can
Yeah.
understand the other side and exactly what you're saying. If you have other things going on and still want to enjoy, should you be able to pay a certain amount to get to a certain level of power, or is it just a hard barrier that you have to accept and or make time for?
Yeah, and I know for me with the astral shards, I bought 200 of them.
Hmm.
So I had the DDO points available, which I would say the amount that was for the 200 of them, I've probably easily made on the server, just on favor.
Yeah.
Um, and then I worked extremely hard, as you know, with the auction houses
Hmm.
to manage those, to crunch the things that we don't want, to repost the things that we do. That's quite a gig right there.
It's a lot of time.
And so to raise the funds to be able to utilize them, I don't see as a pay to win dynamic because I'm working.
Hmm.
I'm sacrificing my actual play time to earn these. I'm not just putting cash down and buying them.
In the first 2 weeks of the game coming out, I played 10 hours a day, 6 days a week, 60 hours over the course of a week, and did that for 2 weeks straight. Since tapered off a bit. And at the end of those 10 hours, every single day, I put in an additional hour, maybe a little more sometimes, on just straight on the Platinum Auction House. Posting,
Right.
reposting, just putting gear up, checking. So all of a sudden, you have 66 plus hours a week, and almost 10% of that being just for the auction house itself. So there's definitely a time investment in. And I think it brings up a really good point on what you just touched on of you've made DDO points through the favor, right? Through an in-game. That's another aspect of DDO that I really enjoy is that you have a very clear cut. Hey, if I TR and go from 1 to 20, I get 600 DDO points on
Uh-huh.
average. And if I do that, a handful of times and gain my TR power, in addition to gaining the DDO points, I can buy, the Supreme Tome. I can buy these things that I do want that are available, and so it
Plus,
all
as a
works very well.
VIP, yeah, and as a VIP, we get 500 DDO points per month. So we also have that 1,500 for this league as well.
Right. And so you said you've made, easily enough to buy those 200 astral shards. I've made close to 6,000 DDO points because of the raw amount that I've played. I have 3,000 on my account right now, and that's after buying a seasonal item for the 10-year free to play
Nice.
package, and I was able to buy that because I played so much hardcore and got that first 5,000 favor on the server, which gives you a massive boost. Should those DDO points be on the table because they were paid, or because they were obtained through actual in-game play time?
I'm of the argument that yes, that they should, and those can be used in whatever way possible. as far as the DDO purchases, I have purchased a 5 DDO point Sully's Grog each life, in case I went in cap, and actually it saved me once.
Hmm.
Currently, they're on sale for 4 DDO points, by the way.
Hey,
and
20%.
then
Let's go.
and then I did get those 200 Astral Shards. Yeah, I purchased the 150 trinket, 150 DDO point trinket there
Hmm.
as well. And so all in all, those are my strict purchases, and I'm pretty sure that if I was to add those up, they don't equate to the amount of favor DDO points I've gotten for favor on hardcore just yet.
Right. And I should note that the free to play event bundle that I bought is 5,000 DDO points, and I bought it on the live server for my main tune for the Supreme Tome,
Yeah,
and didn't do anything on hardcore for it. With that, like, everyone has access to those points, right? If I just strictly playing the game have obtained 5,000-6,000 GDO points, anyone can do that, and you can't punish a player for putting time in when they have that available. I don't think so, at least.
yeah, absolutely.
And so it does border a line of, it is competitive to have the DDO store if you're just obtaining it through in-game funds, through in-game time and energy put in. The availability to spend money on the store for DDO points for Astral Shards is where it again breaks down. But it in itself, I don't think is incorrect. It's just another form of currency that you're making, and those different forms, different Astral Shards, or platinum for the platinum market, then the DDO points for the DDO store. It's a bit more separate, but if it's isolated within the server itself, can really be an addition to the game.
And that might be a nice way looking forward as far as the hardcore server is that it becomes more isolated in that regard. So whatever happens with the Monster Manual, as far as points, whatever, and maybe Astral Shards, whatever happens as far as favor acquisition, but there's no way to purchase with money DDO points or Astral Shards from the DDO store. You have to earn them, and maybe they could infuse other ways on the hardcore server and maybe on live eventually too, where Astral Shards become more available, especially when we're looking at a dynamic where some of those are mandatory for specific guild ship amenities and things of that nature.
Hmm. Definitely. There are definitely hurdles that have to be overtaken with those. There has been duping issues in the past with Astral Shards, and that is still to this day has a effect on some servers where certain items are cranked up on the Astral Shard market because there's just such an influx of those shards. And so that is something that has to be looked into, but it shouldn't be beholden of.
Yeah, that's a really good start to it, and I'm sure we can go deeper on some of these things, some of the dynamics that we haven't talked about in the future.
Yeah, I would love to hear feedback from those that listen, and what topics you want to hear more on, or what topics that we didn't touch on that you would like to hear, whether it's in the hardcore dynamic itself or broader game as a whole, or even we touched on some sociological and psychological aspects of group play. And Yavul here has a plethora of knowledge when it comes to a lot of that environment.
And it's nice to apply it to something that, the listeners and you and I that we absolutely love. Dungeons and Dragons has been a part of our lives for a very long time, and Dungeons and Dragons Online similarly so. And it would be nice to discuss whatever comes up as far as the online version, how it was influenced by pen and paper, Dave Arneson and Gary Gygax, and the evolution of the game, and maybe what that means for Dungeons and Dragons Online as it continues to look forward as well.